Adolf Hitler was an Austrian-born German politician who was the dictator of Germany from 1933 to 1945. He rose to power as the leader of the Nazi Party, becoming Chancellor in 1933 and then assuming the title of Führer und Reichskanzler in 1934. Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, born Yosef Vissarionovich Chugashvili, was a Georgian revolutionary and the ruler of the Soviet Union from 1927 until his death in 1953. He served as both General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and Chairman of the Council of Ministers of the Soviet Union. Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, KG, Ohm, CH.T.D., DL, FRS, RA was a British statesman who served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 1945 during the Second World War, and again from 1951 to 1955. Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini was an Italian politician and journalist who founded and led the National Fascist Party. Harry S. Truman was the 33rd President of the United States, serving from 1945 to 1953, succeeding upon the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt after serving as the 34th Vice President in early 1945. Dwight David, Ike, Eisenhower GCB, Ohm, RE, GCS, CCLH, KC, NPK was an American military officer and statesman who served as the 34th President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. Emperor Showa, better known in English by his personal name Hirohito, was the 124th Emperor of Japan according to the traditional order of succession, ruling over the Empire of Japan from the 25th of December 1926 until the 2nd of May 1947, after which he was Emperor of the State of Japan until his death. Douglas MacArthur was an American military leader who served as General of the Army for the United States, as well as a Field Marshal to the Philippine Army. He was Chief of Staff of the United States Army during the 1930s, and he played a prominent role in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Hideki Tojo was a Japanese politician and general of the Imperial Japanese Army who served as Prime Minister of Japan and President of the Imperial Rule Assistance Association for most of World War II. George Smith Patton Jr. was a general in the United States Army who commanded the 7th United States Army in the Mediterranean theater of World War II, and the 3rd United States Army in France and Germany after the Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, 1st Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, KG, GCB, DSO, PC, DL, nicknamed Monty, and the Spartan General, was a senior British Army officer who served in the First World War, the Irish War of Independence and the Second World War. Charles-André Joseph Marie de Gaulle was a French army officer and statesman who led Free France against Nazi Germany in World War II and chaired the Provisional Government of the French Republic from 1944 to 1946 in order to re-establish democracy in France. Chester William Nimitz was a Fleet Admiral of the United States Navy. He played a major role in the naval history of World War II as Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Pacific Fleet, and Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Ocean Areas, commanding Allied air, land, and sea forces during World War II. Omar Nelson Bradley was a senior officer of the United States Army during and after World War II, holding the rank of General of the Army. Bradley was the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and oversaw the U.S. military's policy making in the Korean War. Mao Zedong, and known as Chairman Mao, was a Chinese communist revolutionary who was the founding father of the People's Republic of China, which he ruled as the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from its establishment in 1949 until his death in 1976. Admiral of the Fleet Louis Francis Albert Victor Nicholas Mountbatten, 1st Earl Mountbatten of Burma, was a British Royal Navy officer and statesman, a maternal uncle of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and second cousin once removed of Queen Elizabeth II. Lyndon Baines Johnson, often referred to by his initials LBJ, was the 36th President of the United States, serving from 1963 to 1969. He had previously served as the 37th Vice President from 1961 to 1963 under President John F. Kennedy. Johnson's presidency began following the assassination of President Kennedy. Josip Broz, Serbo-Croatian Cyrillic, pronounced Josip Bro circumflex Z, the 7th of May 1892 to the 4th of May 1980, commonly known as Tito, Tito II, Serbo-Croatian Cyrillic, pronounced Tito, was a Yugoslav communist revolutionary and statesman, serving in various roles from 1943 until his death in 1980. During World War II, he was the leader of the Partisans, often regarded as the most effective resistance movement in occupied Europe. 4. He also served as the president of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia from the 14th of January 1953, until his death on the 4th of May 1980. Gerald Rudolph Ford Jr. was an American politician who served as the 38th President of the United States from 1974 to 1977. The leader of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, he was appointed vice president by President Richard Nixon in 1973. Chiang Kai-shek, also known as Chiang Chung-cheng and romanized via Mandarin as Chiang Chai-shi and Zhang Jieshi, was a Chinese nationalist politician, revolutionary and military leader who served as the leader of the Republic of China between 1928 and 1975, first in mainland China until 1949 and then in Taiwan until his death. Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov was a Soviet general and Marshal of the Soviet Union. He also served as Chief of the General Staff, Minister of Defense, and was a member of the Presidium of the Communist Party. During the Second World War, Zhukov oversaw some of the Red Army's most decisive victories. Henri Philippe Benoni Omer Pétain, generally known as Philippe Pétain, Marshal Pétain and sometimes the Old Marshal, was a French general officer who attained the position of Marshal of France at the end of World War I, during which he became known as the Lion of Verdun. Victor Emmanuel III reigned as King of Italy from the 29th of July 1900 until his abdication on the 9th of May 1946. In addition, he was Emperor of Ethiopia and King of the Albanians. During his reign of nearly 46 years, which began after the assassination of his father Umberto I, the Kingdom of Italy became involved in two world wars. Konstantin Konstantinovich Rokossovsky was a Soviet and Polish officer who became Marshal of the Soviet Union, Marshal of Poland, and served as Poland's defense minister from 1949 until his removal in 1956 during the Polish October. He was among the most prominent Red Army commanders of World War II. Baron Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim was a Finnish military leader and statesman. He served as the military leader of the Whites in the Finnish Civil War of 1918, Regent of Finland, Commander-in-Chief of Finland's defense forces during World War II, Marshal of Finland, and the 6th President of Finland. Kliment Yefremovich Voroshilov, popularly known as Klim Voroshilov, was a prominent Soviet military officer and politician during the Stalin era. Ivan Stepanovich Konev was a Soviet general and Marshal of the Soviet Union who led Red Army forces on the Eastern Front during World War II, responsible for taking much of Axis-occupied Eastern Europe. Born to a peasant family, Konev was conscripted into the Imperial Russian Army in 1916 and fought in World War I. Peng Dehuai was a prominent Chinese Communist military leader, who served as China's defense minister from 1954 to 1959. Alexander Mikhailovich Vasilevsky was a Russian career officer in the Red Army, attained the rank of Marshal of the Soviet Union in 1943. He served as the Chief of the General Staff of the Soviet Armed Forces and Deputy Minister of Defense during World War II, and as Minister of Defense from 1949 to 1953. Vasily Ivanovich Chuikov was a Soviet military commander and Marshal of the Soviet Union. He is best known for commanding the 62nd Army, which saw heavy combat during the Battle of Stalingrad in the Second World War. Born to a peasant family near Tula, Chuikov earned his living as a factory worker from the age of 12. Nikolai Fyodorovich Vatutin was a Soviet military commander during World War II. Vatutin was responsible for many Red Army operations in Ukraine as commander of the Southwestern Front, and the Voronezh Front during the Battle of Kursk. Władysław Albert Anders was a general in the Polish army and later in life a politician and prominent member of the Polish government in exile in London. Władysław Eugeniusz Sikorski was a Polish military and political leader. Prior to the First World War, Sikorski established and participated in several underground organizations that promoted the cause of the independence of Poland from the Russian Empire. Jean-Joseph Marie Gabriel de Lattre de Tassigny was a French army general during World War II and the First Indochina War. He was posthumously elevated to the dignity of Marshal of France. Semyon Konstantinovich Timoshenko was a Soviet military commander and Marshal of the Soviet Union. Marshal Edward Rides Smiley, also called Edward Smiley Rides, was a Polish politician, statesman, Marshal of Poland and Commander-in-Chief of Poland's armed forces, as well as a painter and poet. Rodion Yakovlevich Malinowski was a Soviet military commander in World War II, Marshal of the Soviet Union, and Minister of Defense of the Soviet Union in the late 1950s and 1960s. He contributed to the major defeat of Nazi Germany at the Battle of Stalingrad and the Battle of Budapest. Li Zongren or Li Sung-jen, courtesy name Delin, was a prominent Guangxi warlord and Kuomintang military commander during the Northern Expedition, Second Sino-Japanese War and Chinese Civil War. He served as vice president and acting president of the Republic of China under the 1947 Constitution. Ivan Kristoforovich Bagramyan, also known as Hovhannes Khachaturi Bagramyan, was a Soviet military commander and Marshal of the Soviet Union of Armenian origin. During World War II, Bagramyan was the second non-Slavic military officer, after Latvian Max Rader, to become a commander of a front. General Stanislaw Maczek was a Polish tank commander of World War II, whose division was instrumental in the Allied liberation of France, closing the Falaise Pocket, resulting in the destruction of 14 German Wehrmacht and SS divisions. Bai Chongxi was a Chinese general in the National Revolutionary Army of the Republic of China and a prominent Chinese nationalist leader. He was of Hui ethnicity and of the Muslim faith. Henry Harley Arnold was an American general officer holding the ranks of General of the Army and General of the Air Force. Maxime Weygand was a French military commander in World War I and World War II. Born in Belgium, Weygand was raised in France and educated at the Saint-Cyr Military Academy in Paris. After graduating in 1887, he went on to become an instructor at the cavalry school at Samar. Fyodor Ivanovich Tolbukhin was a Soviet military commander and Marshal of the Soviet Union. Air Chief Marshal U. Caswall Tremenheer Dowding, 1st Baron Dowding, GCB, GCVO, CMG was an officer in the Royal Air Force. General Leopold Okulicki was a general of the Polish Army and the last commander of the anti-Nazi underground Home Army during World War II. He was arrested after the war by the Soviet NKVD and murdered while imprisoned at Butyrka prison in Moscow. Shui Yu was a Chinese nationalist military general, nicknamed by Claire Li Chennault of the Flying Tigers as the Patton of Asia, and called the God of War by the Chinese. General Tadeusz Komorowski, better known by the name Bor Komorowski, was a Polish military leader. He was appointed commander-in-chief a day before the capitulation of the Warsaw Uprising and following World War II, 32nd Prime Minister of Poland, 3rd Polish government in exile in London. Field Marshal Harold Rupert Leo Frick George Alexander, 1st Earl Alexander of Tunis, KG, GCB, OM, GCMG, CSI, DSO, MC, CD, PC, CAN, PC, the 10th of December 1891 to the 16th of June 1969, was a senior British Army officer who served with distinction in both the First and the Second World War and, afterwards, as Governor-General of Canada and the First Lord Lieutenant of Greater London in 1965. Stanislaw Franciszek Sosabowski CBE was a Polish general in World War II. He fought in the Polish campaign of 1939 and at the Battle of Arnhem in 1944 as commander of the Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade. Kirill Afanasievich Meretskov was a Soviet military commander. Having joined the Communist Party in 1917, he served in the Red Army from 1920. During the Winter War of 1939–1940 against Finland, he had the task of penetrating the Mannerheim Line as commander of the 7th Army.